Whilst down in the West Country to see my parents, I decided to catch up with an old friend down in Cornwall who I hadn't seen for years, at least as long as I've been living in Scotland. I used to work down in Cornwall quite a bit, but I've never really seen it as a tourist or taken time to explore, so he took me on a little adventure. We went to a few places, including the Lizard, Lostwithiel, which has never seemed very lost to me, Polperro and Talland Bay. We also met some cool characters along the way. It was pretty intensely windy the whole time I was down in Cornwall, so if any of the footage is a little shaky, it's because I was struggling to hold on to my camera. The creator of this beautiful sculpture was in when we stopped by to take a look, and so we had a good chat, and he also let me take a look at some of his other stunning works. I especially loved his Mobius strip. If you haven't heard of these, go Google them. They're totally cool.
To say that's called Penpole Creek, which this is the creek here.
Yeah.
And the idea was that the creek has lots of reflections and shadows, and that sort of is evocative of the creek.
I've put his website down below for anyone interested in seeing more or making his day by buying a piece. Unfortunately, my living space is a wee bit small for me to fit any of it in. Of course, at the first opportunity I had, I took my boots off and put my feet in the sea. My friend Norman obviously has an excellent choice in vehicles as he also owns a Berlingo. Polperro is a working fishing harbour between Foy and Loo. It's also a popular place for tourists to descend upon, so I'm glad I visited on a Friday in April. Between the stunning colour of the water, the sharp rocks at the entrance to the harbour, and the ancient fishermen's cottages, it's not surprising it attracts so many visitors. These days, only locals can bring their cars into the village, so you have to park at the top of the hill and walk down. Something I was quite happy with, as the roads become pretty tiny, and I wouldn't want to attempt to drive them even if it was allowed. The first known record of Polperro is in a royal document from 1303. That's quite a long time ago. Polperro also has a history of smuggling that is thought to have prospered as early as the 12th century and continued until the early 19th century. Due to its isolated location, it was particularly difficult for the authorities to catch smugglers in possession of contraband. At the end of the wars with France at the beginning of the 19th century, the government imposed measures to stop smuggled goods entering Britain, and also heavy penalties for related offences, bringing the days of smuggling to an end. Polperro's main trade returned to fishing, which was then overtaken by tourism during the 20th century. Whilst in Cornwall, I obviously had to have a Cornish pasty. I thoroughly recommend the Polperro Bakery. Their jam donuts are delicious too.
Perfect here. Absolutely perfect here it is.
didn't know I was filming him as he walked away from me, so that was just a lucky little capture. The roads get pretty narrow in parts of Devon and Cornwall, but this might be the tightest one I have driven along. The owner of this beautiful, quirky little cottage was very happy for me to film it and also to use the footage. His only requests were that I didn't put him in it or mention where it is. So if you're ever exploring Cornwall, you might be lucky enough to stumble upon it by accident. If it hadn't been for the bitterly cold wind that began to chill our bones whilst chatting in the street, we'd probably have stayed and listened to even more of his stories. The next morning, I was in Talland Bay and back on my own, so I spent a couple of hours taking photos and video of the rock pools before most people had made it to the beach. These might make it into a later video. Then, after a lovely oat milk hot chocolate from the Talland Bay Beach Cafe, who had this awesome sign outside, I went for a windy coast path walk back to Polperro, which had nothing to do with the jam donuts in the bakery.